Working on a large Stuart model steam plant part 8, adjusting the crosshead guides and a couple of minor modifications. If you're following this series, you'll realise that in part 7 it took quite a while to get the valve timing right. And by right I mean perfect, but there's still a problem. I'll repeat this clip in slow motion. Watch the crosshead block and watch the shaft that goes through the crosshead block. It's not the best possible fit, and I don't think this is worn this way. I think it's been built in when the engine was first made. When building a Stuart Victoria, one of the weak points is when you come to align the cylinder. I'll be covering this in my How to Build a Model Steam Engine series very shortly. I'm not going to do anything about the rattle fit of the shaft through the block, but what I am going to do is adjust the crosshead bars to stop the block from moving up and down. This series is really about the entire steam plant, and I don't want to get too bogged down with minor technicalities. What I'm currently doing is releasing the nuts that hold the crosshead guides in place. I'm going to show 2 ways of doing this. This is the first way. Remove everything, take everything off. The parts that I need to get to are these. These are the spacers between the crosshead guides. And then my lathe broke down. The contactor in the middle has been a bit not too good for quite a while, and it decided to stop working. It looked like the 3-phase converter at first, but no, it's the contactor. So I asked an electrician friend of mine to sort it out, and he did. The contactor is bypassed, and here is the part in the chuck ready for machining. A very simple job, but you must be careful when you do this. Do not take too much off. If you do, you'll have to fit a washer, and then that will look unsightly. You may be thinking, how do I know exactly how much metal to remove from the spacers to shorten them? The answer is a very non-engineering solution. It's called feel. I had a feel at the amount of play in the crosshead, and I thought, yeah, I can sort of estimate how much I need to take off. In this clip, I'm showing how I got the spacer out of the other side. Instead of removing the valve bearing mechanism, I just slackened off that nut. I removed the entire nut at the other side, and I could just lift the crosshead guide bar off the stud, then I could get to the spacer. Here's the operation in full. Slacken off the nut that holds the valve mechanism onto the guide bar and the guide bar onto the spacer. Then remove the other nut entirely, and you will find that it's possible to lift the guide bar off the stud like this, closely followed by the spacer that I need to machine. After machining a tiny amount of metal off the spacer, I can put it back in position. And once I tightened both of the nuts, it was time to see whether it all worked. If I'd machined too much metal off the spacers, then when I tightened the nuts, the guide bars would clamp the crosshead in place, but thankfully this is not the case. In this clip I'm just checking the tightness of the nuts on the end of the guide bars, and yes, they're quite tight, so everything's okay. I don't recommend working on the engine with a spanner when the engine's running. The next thing I'm going to look at are the lubricators on the main bearings. These small glass oilers from 21st century steam are really nice looking things, but I do find it a pain removing the cap, which also is a needle valve to regulate the oil flow, which I always forget to close anyway. So after a run, when I forget to close the needle valves, all of the oil runs out of the lubricator and makes a mess down the side of the engine. I much prefer oil cups for certain applications. The bigger the engine, the better they look. The smaller the engine, they can start to look a bit over fussy. But I do like the look of the glass oilers on the main bearing caps. The thread in the top of these glass oilers is the same thread as a standard brass oil cup. I've fitted some brass oil cups to the glass oilers, and now lubricating the main bearings is very easy. Even though there's still some play in the shafts that go through the crosshead, the engine's running very well indeed, so I think I'm going to leave it at this. The next little job to do is to make the condenser match the boiler. I'm making a couple of simple boiler bands. I wrapped a length of boiler banding around the condenser and cut 2 pieces to length. Then I bent the ends at right angles. Here I'm drilling the holes in the end to take the bolt that will clamp the boiler band in place. Please note this is a health and safety warning. This is a very small drill, and if the drill was to grab and try and spin the metal out of my hand, I could hold it in place against the drill. The drill would probably break, but I wouldn't be injured. I would never do this using a larger drill. I'd use a toolmaker's clamp to clamp the brass to the wooden block. Fitting these boiler bands is very simple, but you do have to be careful not to scratch the paint on the condenser. I'm using a 7BA nut and bolt, and I put this through with the gap at the top, then I rotate the gap to the bottom, and only then do I tighten the nuts. I'm just using a socket driver for this, and now that's it really. By the way, I did measure the distance from each side. It's 1.5 inches. I wanted it to be not quite in the middle. Sometimes if boiler bands are symmetrical on cylinders, it starts to look like a bumblebee. In the next part of this video series, I'll be doing a little bit of work on the boiler. But for now, that's it. I'm going to leave it to the end with the engine running, various shots, various speeds and various loads. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. In the slow motion clip, the ticking you can hear in the background is rainfall on the roof of the shed, and I can't do much about that. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website. Click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you will find it very easy to find other videos that you may like to watch.